Welcome to the third episode of David Wallace's trip to Taurus and the information that I came back with and how it changed my life. I appreciate all the wonderful comments that we've been getting on Lowell's channel for the first two episodes. This episode is going to be a little bit different. I won't be showing photographs of ships or the inside of ships or of Beyond Earth Sentience, but I will be talking about some of the information that they gave me regarding how we are communicated to through pulses of light that come from their ships. I've entitled those pulses of lights CLPT and CLPF.
11:30 my time, California.
And that stands for Continuous Light Pulse Transmission or Continuous Light Pulse Frequencies. These are terms that I've come up with because I've sort of had to come up with my own theory about how they communicate with us, how it is attenuated by the human mind, and then later turned into a series of instructions or information, or just something that makes us feel good. It depends on what we're looking for, what we need to know, and what they want to share with us based on our own evolutionary process, the pattern of our own mind, and of course the waves of love that come from our heart. Because the most important underlying theme of everything that we do is to remember to practice love and patience, kindness and forgiveness as often as possible. Those may not be scientific things, but in a lot of respects, they're the most important things to me. So after we talk about CLPT and CLPF, I'm going to talk a little bit about the dynamics of thermography, thermal light transmissions, compression and annealing of math packages to light photons, how that is done. I have a diagram of one of the tools that they use to anneal information to photons, and then also I have information about the transmission device that's on board most of the ships that send us this information. This information is free for everybody. I'm not trying to copyright anything or patent anything. I want this information to get out to the mass public, the World Wide Web. Anybody that wants to take on or take over some of my work and carry it on from there is welcome to. This isn't something that is just for me and it makes me important. It's something that they've shared with me that I've finally been able to put down into some cohesive and understandable terminology so that I can turn around and share it with everybody that I know and love. And that's you guys. I hope you enjoy this episode and look forward to the comments in the comment section later. Have a beautiful day. You'll have to forgive my lack of fancy graphics. I'm not into purchasing fancy graphics to explain such a simple idea. So here I've drawn a little hiker guy, and he's got a flashlight in his hand. And there's the mountains. And here in the distance above the horizon, you'll see a ship. There's a blue light beam coming down, and it's pretty much attenuating this whole area of the observer's head. So this is communication with light pulses. And it's very interesting what happens to human beings when we receive light. You see, you can't see light, can you? Light's always a reflection off of another surface. That's how we're able to distinguish things around us. Light is very beautiful. It's nice to have. It can be warm. It can be cold. It can be subdued. It can be subtle, or it can be intense and very bright. But when we are sitting or standing 10 miles away from an interstellar conveyance and they want to get your attention, one of the best ways to do that is to flash a light in your face, much like this little flashlight here. And I know that a lot of us have taken a laser pointer out at night and shown it up at the sky at what you think is a ship or what may be a ship in order to get their attention too. So in a lot of ways, it's sort of like a copycat game, isn't it? So here a ship is sending a light beam down to this observer who's standing up in the mountains looking up at the sky. Let's see if I can get this without collapsing the whole scenario. There we go. That's all right. Actually, I'll just do this and make it easier. There we go. All right, so here's a close-up of the ship, and you can see this line here is representing a ray or a beam of light. Now, what I've done is I've exploded that beam of light to probably 1,000 times its size,
And I've drawn it as horizontal lines going across. There's many horizontal lines. Each one of those horizontal lines represents one photon of light, almost like a disk. So every light disk is a complete logogram or pictogram scenario. On each of those light disks, or each of those photons, is a series of sequence of mathematic numbers, symbols, shapes, geometric shapes, lines. It could be micro photographs of something, but each photon carries with it a message that's highly coordinated. The first of the lines, the first of the photic light that enters your eye, carries with it a trigger or a switch. That means that the information that's encoded in the first series of perhaps 100 to 500 photons is an attenuating signal that will travel into your parietal lobes, become processed, and then your parietal lobes will send that through the diencephalon, and your diencephalon will transfer that information to the part of the brain which it is encoded for. Fascinating and interesting as it may seem, when we receive a light pulse or a light flash, it triggers several things in the human mind immediately. It triggers the need to recognize it, it triggers the need to understand it, and it triggers the need to either remember it or get rid of it. And in this case, when we see a stream of light in a flash, that one flash of light has many millions of photons in it. And it has a beginning and an end. Unlike other things in reality, light has a beginning and an end. It depends on the transmission. So the first several 100 or 200 or 500 mechanisms that are embedded into the light photons are a trigger which tell the parietal lobes in your mind which enzyme to be either produced through your limbic system or which amino acids to charge electrically and send down the diencephalon, which is a very long sort of tubular portion of the brain that sits beneath the center of your cerebrum. Every light model is encapsulated within a light disk. So the triggering light that comes into your eye tells your brain that this is a message. It tells your brain where to store the message, and it tells your brain what enzymatic response or what amino acid response or both are needed in order to attenuate the message to the proper region of your mind. As we get further and further along into these encoded photon packages, many pieces of individual information of different nature can be added to this message. And as light travels, the whole information package can be downloaded through your eye in a matter of 1 second or less. Whatever the amount of time it takes for a flash of light or a beam of light to enter your eye and to finish. Because obviously you'll know when the light beam is finished when there's no more light. That last photic message you receive is the end trigger, and that last part of the flash of light will have the encoding to let your mind know to either expect more light triggers or that was the end of the message. The transfer of logograms, ideogrammatic and pictographic information through CLPF, communication light pulse flash, without side lobe light waste or interferometer fade. So side lobe light waste, for those of you that are unsure about what that is that anytime you shine a flashlight at a wall, there's always this slight diffusement or this circumferential aura that comes off of that light, that center bright beam. And those photons scatter away like a corona from the sun. Well, that's known as side lobe light waste. They're able to control all of the light photons by utilizing a magnetic shroud during the encapsulation and annealing process. It produces more of a laser at their end, but they can control the photaic frequency so that it's not a laser when it hits your eye. So it starts out as a laser, but then slowly, softly diffuses, even though it's traveling at the speed of light. A light flash, just a single 1-second flash, can carry 100 to 1,000 pieces of information, or just one piece. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a trigger key or thought foundational flash. Every light particle in each wavelength contains a tiny piece of information to correlate a conscious encoded message. One light particle may be a complementary instruction to perhaps to a previous or current light particle instruction, or it may be precedent or antecedent code for a complete cognition of an idea. There exist infinite particle arrangements, even infinite particle entanglements. The human brain is able to absorb vast amounts of random data and sequential, non-sequential code in the form of images and take this information, whereby it's transferred to the region of the brain where it is most well suited for either cognitive collection and storage or action being electrochemical in this instance. The light flashes can be stacked and are stored in a lamellar format. Light flashes are cumulative. A light flash can also be cognition complementary for further instructions or triggers. So the light here comes down, enters your optic nerve, goes deep into your parietal lobes, and is turned into a message, and then your brain, which is many hundreds of millions of years old, knows exactly what to do with that light, and it puts that signal, the electrochemical signal generated by the light flash, into a storage area until those light flashes accumulate and become an idea. So here's an example of the very furthest, what would be the initial, but is also the terminus. Here's your first trigger flash of symbols, mathematic diagrams, pictures, geometry. This is the first light. And your brain receives this image, which will be converted into 3 dimensions, and then will react enzymatically to the instructions that are encoded into that photon. This sort of is the secret of transfer. The original point image carries a specific numeric value which causes a reaction within the parietal lobes. This reaction is the conversion of light energy into a specific mathematic program specifically designed to attenuate regions of the human brain. So this could be one flash image of 700 million pieces of information. The origin point image is an on-off switch which informs our mind when to begin assimilation and when it's finished with the transmission. Side lobe light waste is eliminated using an electromagnetic orbicular guidance frame. All photons are numbered and delivered with a vibrational cadence. The cadence is a lower frequency pulse beginning with an initial wave release at -2 millionth of a hertz. In other words, an infinite range of ohms starting in the lower trillionths inaudible, yet subject to an ascending scale. So you may end up understanding that light and sound are very similar in both the way that they travel and the fact that they can have modulating wavelengths. So if you thought about sound, you would go from an absolute zeroth inaudible point to a very, very high pitch. And this is how they mathematically encode a light framework, because light and sound are remarkably similar, and they're both a particle, but we'll talk about sound particles at the end of this video. The first series of photons carries an electric charge in the form of a series of frequencies. These light frequencies create an attenuation or opening trigger. The trigger is in the form of amino acids or enzymes that your mind produces specific to converting photaic stimuli into photochemical reaction. This reaction is a normal evolutionary reaction evolved by design, which is directly attributed to humankind's flight fear response, one of our species' oldest enzymatic reactions. The origin point image is the same as the very last image, the opening enzymatic trigger and final sequence trigger, which is the conclusion of the image. So this is the device that they use, and it's hilariously simple, but it's also very elegant in the way they designed it. This is called a photaic proton frequency compression chamber, and it's for the purpose of understanding the principle of laminating light photons to sound frequency in a field of binding magnetic waves. Right here we have a box, and the box, believe it or not, is 99.9% electrolytically pure iron. When the iron, before it's turned into a six-sided box, when the iron is formed, it's poured out on an absolutely level annealing table where it's slowly cooled. During the slow cooling process, the slab of iron is subject to a very powerful electromagnetic wave, which draws the iron ions into exactly the same direction. So all the iron ions are pointing down towards the magnet as the slab of iron is cooling across the table. Once all of the ions are magnetically directioned from the annealing process or the cooling process, then what we want to do is that slab of iron gets cut into 6 pieces into what is about the size of a shoebox, really. The purpose of the directional magnetic ionization of the iron is so that the box can be pointed inwards upon itself. So in a sense, you'd have sort of 6 magnetized iron slabs that carry the exact equal magnetic attraction. They're all facing each other. What I have here in the bottom is a crystal disc, and this disc is like a very large magnifying disc, only it's flat on the bottom. On the bottom of that disc are 2 holes that are ground with an optically polishing needle that runs right up to almost the very surface of the inside of that convex disc dome, but it's just a couple of microns below the surface. They run 2 gold wires that are going right up through those 2. There's a hole in the bottom of this plate, and the 2 gold wires go right up to the bottom of this disc and almost look like they're penetrating the surface. But remember, those 2 wires are just under the surface of that dome. So they use neodymium, and in order to exact or in order to change magnetic fluctuations within the box device, they have a hole in the center of each of these boxes. There's a borosilicate glass or crystal washer that's about 2 inches long and about 2.5 to 3 inches in diameter, and that protects the neodymium plate from making contact with the iron exterior box, but it also protects it from having any electromagnetic fluctuations or electronic charge transfer, because what we do is we put a high voltage input up through those gold wires into the bottom of that disc. The crystal disc is powder coated with tritium, palladium, and rhodium. The tritium, palladium, rhodium powder coating on the outside of the concave or convex disc gets excitation. So you get the molecular or atomic excitation of those rare mineral atoms when you run a very powerful charge through. This end of the box is where the sound wave comes in. The light wave and electrical charge comes out this way. Now, if you want to add an image to your light package, you can do so through this top projection device. And here, these lines represent the frequency of input. So you have the crystal separator, the neodymium magnetic disc, the 99.9% electrolytically pure iron box. You have attenuation wires, gold-plated copper or gold-plated rhodium, 1/8 inch in diameter. You have your photon or your proton excitation plate. All of the holes around this box are about 1/2 inch in circumference. And then I have some other specs to show you on how the transmission occurs. So what happens is when you put a sound wave in and you mix that with an image, whether it's geometric or whether it is a physics symbol or a photograph type of image or just some sort of simple geometry like a triangle or a square, when you heat that sound wave, and this is also one of the important attributes of this, is that the sound waves are heated. The heat of the sound wave anneals the holographic projection. The palladium, the tritium, and the rubidium, or the rhodium, when those atoms are excited, they disperse from the top of the crystal. What happens is those atoms of tritium and palladium almost powder coat the image to the sound wave. The sound wave is then sent through with photonic discharge, and we'll get to that. And what you have at the end of the device, at the last aperture of that box, is you have a borosilicate glass cylinder that has an annealed rod of argon and tungsten, and that's at the very center like a cathode ray tube. The speed of light is related to the permeability and permittivity constants. And this is a formula right here for the electric energy density in free space. And I wrote that formula, so I'm just going to zoom in so you can see it. All right, so this is the electric energy density in free space. Non-magnetic housing of polycarbonate or polyurethane is the tube in which the image goes through, because it can no longer be subjected to any electromagnetic or magnetic interference. At a certain point, the power of the wave has to be replaced with the concept of power density. Power density formula that I've written out is right there. And the thermal conductivity of a polymer, I've also written the formula for that there. So what you have is a production conduit for sending very powerful frequencies of light, very powerful frequencies of high voltage. It's insulated, it's an electrode, and it's also a plasma generator. Electrode connector points, high thermal conductivity polymers, all of those things that you would think of when you're working on a specific project where you want to send information, encode information, or put information into a form of light or sound wave. You have to consider three-dimensional optical resolution. There's photoacoustic microscopy, which occurs in a non-Hermitian engineering of single-mode, two-dimensional laser arrays. You have to consider the fundamental application of multi-photon excitation, because when you're putting electrical charge through a crystal disc that has been powder coated with many microscopic layers of palladium and tritium and rubidium, the three-dimensional photon migration has to be controlled, and that's why there's a magnetically sound or a magnetically equal box, because those excited atoms will go straight up from the disk. Image reconstruction and optical tomography and generation of pulsed polarization entangled two-photon state. And this is via temporal and spectral engineering. So when you put out a beam of very, very highly concentrated light and you are attaching an image to that light, you have to do that with the excitation of rare element atoms. It can be done by heating sound. Heating sound right now is a very top secret thing that's occurring at the government. And of course, they always think of it as weapons. This obviously could be turned into a weapon. Everything is weaponizable. Even if it's a cork out of a wine bottle, it could be turned into a cork bomb. So, if you understand the molecular construction of every item that exists in the universe, but only human beings do that. So that's the array end, and here is an image that I drew of the array cylinder. So let me just move this back a little bit, and there we go. So let's do that. So the array cylinder is very similar to a borosilicate glass. And borosilicate's used quite a bit in higher technology because of its high temperature resistance and its strength, but also because of the flow and the directionality of light, which can be controlled depending upon the compression of the borosilicate atoms during the glass's manufacturing process. They use borosilicate glass, or something very similar to it, for the tip of the projector beam. So remember, there's, what did I do with that picture? Oh, it's behind this one. So there's the end of the projection. This is the projection cylinder. All right. So these are borosilicate washers that are inside a borosilicate tube. The lines that you see represent magnetism. These red dots that go around the cylinder in a corkscrew motion are interchangeable on the exterior of the cylinder. And what these magnetic dots do is they control the flow of the information through the center of those borosilicate washers. Up here in this diagram are a couple of interesting features that I was unable to draw in the same picture because this device is so complicated. The outside of this borosilicate hollow glass tube has many hundreds, if not several thousand, silver welding points where hundreds, if not thousands, of gold wires actually droop or drop freely away from the device, almost like hair. And then this whole device is ensconced once more into a polycarbonate tube shell, which can withstand the rigors of the atmosphere while they're floating above the planet, shooting a light message through this device to you. So it's an energetically created atomic heat laminated photic projection, and this device of image projection and this device of sound wave input are so highly variable that they run two projectors concurrently. One is a sound wave projector, which is mathematically timed to this image projection, which is mathematically timed to match the sound wave input. As these two things occur, the excitation of protons occurs on the crystal disk. The heating of the box laminates the excited rare element atoms to the heated image, and the heated image is sent along its way with the photons. And this is the device that they send it with. So when we receive information from beyond Earth sentience, it comes in a light stream. And the light stream has so much information in it that it causes one to sort of realize that this is how it works. They send us a light stream, it's full of information, and then the light stream comes and coordinates itself in our mind. What I've done here is put up a diagram for time, light, gravity, and sound, but I'll just finish off a few tips about light propagation and light information systems. So what I've drawn here is an image of a human being suffering from 5G. Up in the sky, you can see the government-sponsored jet spraying aluminum, lithium, microcellulose nanoparticle spray. The bioengineered aluminum ketone, phosphate, is reacting with the 5G, which causes a complete control of your heart, giving you heart palpitations. It gives you motor neuron failure. 5G gives us brainstem dysfunction, electronic interference of spinal cord functions. It causes severe arthritis, musculoskeletal dysfunction failure, loss of sensitivity, gastric failure, testicular and prostate cancer, kidney and glandular failure, and finally cancer. So this is part of what other people call a zero pop program. But I just want to let you know, human beings are extremely sensitive to these terrible things that are going on all around us. Light wave propagation can be controlled and used to combat 5G. But one of the things that's interesting about sound and sound waves is that the G note, the octave G, the higher of the G of the scale of G, actually mitigates the scalar radiation and converts it to sine waves. So if you can go out and buy yourself a musical tone bar, get one of the upper scale of G, and when you ring it, it will mitigate the 5G signal that comes from the towers. And it has a nice sound to it too. So let's talk about time, light, gravity, and sound, because we mentioned it briefly in the other episode. And it's interesting because time, light, gravity, and sound, none of them are non-variable functions. The Hilbert space doesn't recognize these as forms or substance, yet cannot exist without them. Every function or domain function of reality, every part of reality, is part of a system. So I ask, what is the system of reality? And what is the domain function? What glue binds them to a time domain function? So time, light, gravity, and sound are sort of the new, old, grand unified theory. Light frequency, speed, and wavelength. So Fg, force of gravity, G is universal gravitational constant, V, M1, mass of the first, and M2, mass of the second, and distance between objects. Gravity is described in wave equations. V for velocity measured in microseconds, lambda, wavelength measured in meters of sound, and F for frequency measured in hertz. There is no formula for time. There's no equation for time. There are versions of equations for time that are based on scales, based on graphs, and based on linear flowcharts. So instead of trying to find an equation for time, I just wrote infinity, because that's, to me, what time is. It's infinity. Here with light, you have a frequency, speed, and wavelength, lambda, and then gravity is described in wave equations. The sound is also, so it's frequency measured in hertz, v for velocity in microseconds. So time, light, gravity, and sound, those are the four main components of reality in which we exist. And yet there's no simple explanation for what binds them together. You cannot remove time and have light, gravity, and sound. And you cannot just have light and gravity, or you can't just have sound and time. You see, time, light, gravity, and sound have to work together in a very powerful unity. I'm spending the next 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years trying to discover what it is that binds time, light, gravity, and sound together and allows them to work so uniquely and succinctly together, knowing that if you remove any one of those aspects of reality, the whole field collapses. So time, light, gravity, and sound are something that we should all be thinking about as far as understanding, because if you realize that time, light, gravity, and sound all operate under the same code, then you're going to realize that time has to be a particle. Light frequencies. Light is made up of many particles. Gravity is a particle in the form of gravitons. And sound can be broken up into particles or become a particle. And particles of vibrations or frequency can also represent sound. So think about time, light, gravity, and sound as the new grand unified theory, and try and understand what it is that binds time, light, gravity, and sound together. They're not willing to give me all the answers, but they do give me some really interesting questions, and that's one of the big ones that I'd really like to share with you guys. I've drawn a couple other things about time, light, gravity, and sound. So, if we look at time, light, gravity, and sound as being compressed together by 2 floors, one up on top, one on the bottom, that holds them all together, could there be a special gravity that holds these things together? If there could be a first-dimensional expression of a wave covariance and discordance, then here you can see time, light, gravity, and sound in the center of this black sphere, and this is sort of like a hamburger patty. Reality on top, reality on bottom, squeezing them together to hold them together. Nah, that's not how it works. Second dimensional expression of wave compression and concordant discordant variations in field compression. First dimensional expression of wave covariance and discordance. So here's a couple of personal notes when I was trying to figure this out. I drew this picture probably within the first 3 or 4 months of getting through halfway through my schoolwork, and when I tried to talk about time, light, gravity, and sound as a new grand unified theory, I was told to shut up. So here's the formula that I've written for time, light, gravity, and sound, and it really boxes out nicely, and you could put that into a Laplace transform and find the 0th point where time doesn't exist. So I've taken the symbol for infinity to represent a formula for time, and then added light, gravity, and sound. And so now we have the function of time. So f of s over time, or f of s over infinity, equals squared light over gravity, and sound, which equals time light, or time initial, or your first existence, over light squared, with gravity over sound. And it's interesting how that worked out, because gravity can control sound. So time, light, gravity, and sound, T over L, G over velocity, lambda function, or frequency. So this is the formula for that. So here's another interesting idea, and I jotted it down rather quickly, but still it carries the same sort of message. So sound waves, time waves, light waves, and gravity waves. And interesting, all of those four components have waves, or they can function within waves. So that could be in a scalar wave or in a nice smooth sine wave. But what we see is that time, light, gravity, and sound are working so similarly that one begs the question, how come time is not being viewed as a particle? So the whole field of time, light, gravity, and sound is in a divergence field. The space fields arrive from the same derivative as the field in which they exist. I've written out the formula for that. All time and space converge at the same place at the same time. I've written out the equation for that. So here is my answer for a divergence field equation. And of course I've dropped it into a Laplacian and run the Newtonian theory through it. And it comes up okay. It means that time, light, gravity, and sound can be viewed as a single item that passes through all other items totally unaffected. Time, light, gravity, and sound can travel as a single wave, and it's totally unaffected by that which it passes through. So in conclusion of today's topic, I want to talk a little bit more about time, light, gravity, and sound and the grand unified theory. Quantum theory advanced steadily through the 20th century, though one of physics' greatest minds, and I'm referring to Albert Einstein, showed some certain disdain or disapproval of it. One of my favorite understandings of Einstein's thinking about quantum theory was that it failed to embrace the harmonious way in which God created the universe. I kind of like that about Einstein. He was looking for the symphony of God. He was looking for the song of the Creator. And he had all these other people around him saying, no, it's particles. It's all about little tiny particles. You see, it's believed by Einstein's contemporaries that it was his instinct that drove him onward to complete a complementary sympathetic connection between modern physics, classical physics, and the newly discovered world of subatomic particles. In Einstein's attempt at a greater symmetry and unification of known physics, he spent the latter years of his life trying to provide a more simple mathematical rule to the concept of existence. Many years later, Carl Sagan commented about the grand unified theory, noting that in his personal belief that he would slap his forehead for missing the simple answer sitting before him all of this time. But here I quote Einstein, "All of my attempts, however, to adapt the new theoretical foundation of physics to this new type of knowledge failed completely." He adds, "It was as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath me." It's been some 70 years since Einstein said this. When he ended his pursuit of the one theory of everything, many physicists today still approach it and the idea of a unified theory of everything in an attempt to understand the nature of matter, energy, space, and time. Now, matter, energy, space, and time, isn't that funny? Because time, light, gravity, and sound, which is what was proposed to me by Weimer, is what they should be studying. The most popular grand unified theories incorporate a new proposed symmetry of nature called supersymmetry. Supersymmetry is an important component in even more ambitious schemes to unify gravity with the other forces of nature at an enormous superunification mass called the Planck mass. These theories often replace the point-like elementary particles we consider by tiny quantized strings. This was considered in order to reduce the problems encountered in quantizing and quantifying the gravitational interaction, while many superunification schemes have generated considerable interest in the different fields and studies of particle physics. In order to properly verify supersymmetry, it is vital to detect superparticles. Every proposed supersymmetry particle function must conform to the idea that every particle then must have a super antiparticle, or balanced opposite. As subatomic particles break down, deplete, decay, or disperse, there must be another mirror particle which has the opposite reaction. This must be instantaneous and mirror the behavior of the given particle in every way. As these particles, like muons, then they would have an anti-muon. Protons have antiprotons, bosons, antibosons, etc., etc. In the case of light, a photon supersymmetrical partner is called a photino. It is hoped by today's modern physicists that the weight, the behavior, pathway, and function and value of these supersymmetrical particles can be proven empirically. Current experiments with the Hadron Colliders has failed to detect any supersymmetric particles. Accredited mainstream scientists are hoping these fantastic ideas about particles will be realized later when the next generation of higher energy devices are created. Oh my God, what does that tell you? Last year in Shasta, I spoke briefly about the tokamak electromagnetic plasma furnace. I won't be discussing it much right now, but I strongly suggest everyone out there research the tokamak. And I believe that's spelled Tokamak. It's a gigantic electroplasma furnace. And I want you to look up what the scientists are hoping it'll produce, how it's made, and where it's located. So, I'd like to share a bit more about what Weimer told me, and I couldn't resist mentioning the failure of mainstream science to produce any evidence regarding the existence of either dark matter or supersymmetry particles. You see, all of the stuff that they've been awarding themselves PhDs and Nobel Prizes for has been a scam. It's bogus nonsense. None of it's working. But they've taken trillions of dollars from human beings in order to follow their little parade of interesting particles down the road of perdition. I'm sorry, but we're no different than they are. Our pseudoscience to them, well, their science is pseudoscience to us. Only they get away with murder and lie to us about it. And then we don't do murder and we don't lie. We have these experiences and bring them forward to the public, and yet mainstream scientists, mainstream society, mainstream media all laugh at us. It's pretty funny, isn't it? I mean, here's all these PhDs going for supersymmetry particles and dark matter, but neither one of them exist, and they've spent trillions of dollars on it. I can think of a lot more better uses for that kind of money, feeding children and housing people. I couldn't resist mentioning the failure of mainstream science to produce any evidence regarding the existence of DM. It doesn't exist, no matter how many billions of dollars we throw at it. As a failed idea or theory at the beginning of this lecture, I mentioned briefly subatomic particles and their imagined antiparticles. And to date, no evidence has come forward to corroborate supersymmetry, yet another failed fantasy of mainstream science. It's hilarious to me that what I'm going to share is evidence of support of the grand unified theory, yet as I mentioned through accredited science, though accredited sciences are close, they failed to their efforts to understand what the real grand unified theory is. The grand unified theory is the hopeful discovery of the superposition of super subatomic particles and quarks that make up the answer to the origins of the universe. That's their matter, energy, space, and time. So when I pointed out that time, light, gravity, and sound was similar, it really is sort of the thing that we need to be looking at. It's nice to know a bit about time, light, gravity, and sound, but it's more important to understand what binds them together. And it's that very curious energy that binds time, light, gravity, and sound together that we must find and discover. And once we do, I've been told by my friends from the Taurus Council of Galactic Scientists that is the secret. It's the secret of which binds the four aspects of reality together that creates the reality that we exist in and will allow us to go into different realities. Matter is a product of time and gravity. Energy is a product of time, light, gravity, and sound. Space is a product of time, light, gravity, and frequencies. And time is a particle, not an infinite constant. It has an infinite relationship with itself. Here in time, light, gravity, and sound, time is the proparticle and quantum antiparticle of itself. Light is visible and invisible energy in photaic expression. Gravity is a particle and produces gravitons and antigravitons. Sound is a frequency or wave vibration, which is both audible and inaudible. It is a product of the union of gravity, light, and time. So in summary, the topic of the grand unified theory, matter, energy, space, and time, are what? They are the byproduct of time, light, gravity, and sound, the four main aspects of reality. How many billions has been wasted? But because the governing bodies of university-accredited scientists approve one another, then they legitimize their own program. They approve their own studies and codify them. Not all science is bogus. Strange how most intriguing topics, such as subatomic antiparticles, which have never been discovered by CERN, or dark matter, are at the forefront of physics today, but neither has been proven. You can see how the pseudoscience of beyond light speed, interstellar travel, is mocked. Mainstream mocks everything about everything that I study. I know that we can travel beyond light speed, but we just haven't discovered the exact technology or route in which we take. Like I said before, sometimes they're conduits, like like transition holes, wormholes, and sometimes it's bending time. Sometimes it's connecting 2 points of space and then releasing them. But however we do travel beyond light speed, it isn't the position for mainstream science to mock us, especially after we've discovered that they've been stealing trillions of dollars from us over the last 40 years looking for supersymmetric particles of dark matter. How dare they even point a finger at the science that we study? Let's look at time for a moment. Here on Earth, we regard time as infinite, inescapable. To the vain an enemy, to those of great age and wisdom an old friend. Mainstream science teaches us that time is a non-spatial continuum, that it's measured in terms of events, which space one another from past through the present to future. I suppose for humans, the most acceptable way to visualize the existence of time is through the study of geological chronology, fossil records, and tree rings. I feel time, and I sense its unique existence by observing the passage of light. I'm a Buddhist in theory. This gives me the unique opportunity to practice mindfulness. When I am in deep meditation, some 2 to 4 hours may pass by. I am not searching for nirvana or Sartori. I am in complete mindfulness of my home in the world and floating in silence within the galaxy. But in my mind, in my deepest peaceful part of my mind, I would never dream that time was a non-spatial continuum. You see, we cannot put control mechanisms on the infinite, and we cannot put mental control mechanisms on the unobservable. We have to accept the nature around the universe and the nature that's provided for us in this existence as prima facie. And that when we transfer to the fourth dimension and when we transfer to the fifth dimension and we become higher beings, many of the aspects of time, like gravity and sound, will still be there in that continuum. But it's not a non-spatial continuum. It's a reality. I think that there's a defined geometry. I certainly think there's a defined space to the universe. But the defined shape eludes my species for the time being. You can view time as a loop, but then the constraints of a loop is analogous to possession of a surface area. Time must therefore be a string, but this single string would have to be wider in diameter than the universe itself in order to encompass and express its effect. Universally, all within the same moment. So time defined as a string with no beginning and no ending would be impossible in itself. You'd need some governing body to maintain its existence. The universe, therefore, is not created by time, only influenced by the nature of its existence. This tells me that the universe has been in existence forever, and that the universe will continue to be in existence forever. Here we realize that time affects everything in existence, yet completely unaffected by anything in existence. So I'd like to postulate that time is an emanation from the center of all existence. And this sentence implies that our universe may have many more infinite universes surrounding it. As an example, just for your cognitive value, rather than a determination which describes the known universe as an amorphous blob, for now let's sort of imagine our universe as a perfect sphere, and surrounding the sphere are an infinite number of other spheres. I believe that we must be within many trillions upon trillions upon trillions of universes until it spreads out infinitely. And here we go. so you don't have to look at that anymore. There's a nice picture of a ship. And then this is a poster for the Extraterrestrial Defense Initiative. This means that whenever we shoot one down or one crashes, we have to be at the crash site before the men in black get there. So if anybody wants to join the EDI, just send me an email. Their best response time is 20. EDI needs you there in 10. Let's go rescue those friends that fall from the sky. And then this is from Kim Jim. It's just a quick note to say thank you. And he wanted me to tell you that your mind and soul carry within all of the world the gateways that help you see and enable to connect to any place or any dimension. Anything that you need to see and experience, your mind has the key to enter these gateways. He goes on to say that we want nothing from you but to guide you to this new awakening. From your earliest beginnings, your species was given the ability to transcend the moment of your physical surroundings, which allows your species the unique ability to join with your galactic family. Be in service to those around you. You have the ability to feel the needs of your home world, the needs of one another, and the creatures which share the planet with you. There exists nothing created to cause you fear or concern. The entire universe is in balance. Feel this balance. Feel with your hearts and allow your mind to act on them. Do not seek to guide this new experience we bring you. Feel with your heart and your mind will see the solution. You will understand the universal message we have been sending you daily. So, really cool. We have a lot of support. I feel the heavenly messengers surrounding me right now saying, David, it's great to get this information out. Be yourself and be unafraid. So use your hearts, use your intuition, listen to your collective voice, and be true to your school, your tribe. And I will see you guys in the next installment and the end of this series for series number 4.